Now we've got two hands coming up here. On table number 3, we have a pot size raise from Joe Banks under the gun. Joe is, I believe he's on the tighter side, but I'm not positive. He is a regular in these games, I'm sure. The pot size raise with 100 big blind stacks, and given that he's on the tighter side, I still think that you can probably call with 8s in middle position here and just hope to take the flop multi-way and giving yourself, good set odds. So the call pre-flop is fine. On table number 1, Villain V opens in what is effectively the cutoff, or effectively the hijack, I should say. And I'm not even going to try and pronounce the screen name, but the cutoff goes ahead and 3-bets to $12. And the action folds around to our hero in the big blind. Frequently, this can just be a fold here, and it might even be the case that it's a fold because of Villain V's stack depth. But I will say that this is, in my opinion, other than the stack depth, this is a textbook setup for the cold 4-bet bluff. First of all, we have, and I'm just making assumptions here, of course, but what are likely to be two competent players raising and re-raising in late position, something that comes up quite frequently and that is often done with suspect hands. In the big blind, we have King Jack suited, which blocks some of the value combinations that might be raised pre-flop or 3-bet, and also if our cold 4-bet were ever to be flat called, while King Jack suited may be dominated, it can still make some pretty darn good straights and flushes to play after the flop, not to mention the fact that our hero will be repping a pretty strong range of hands. So this, like I said, is pretty close to a textbook setup for the cold 4-bet bluff. The only thing that might scare me away would be stats on my opponent or the stack depth of Villain V. And I just say that because if we look, effective stacks between the 3-better and us are pretty close to 220 big blinds. So I'd like the 4-bet to be in the $30 or plus range, which is putting in a whole bunch of money if Villain V ends up jamming, and then at that point it kind of becomes a mistake. So it's just something to take into consideration. On table number 3 now, where Joe Banks had opened to just under $5 pre-flop, we had called and Wopey had overcalled from the small blind. We get a half-pot lead from Wopey on what is a pretty dry King 4-4 rainbow board. I do have a few comments to make about this hand. So Joe is going to fold and the action is now going to be on us. First of all, I'd like to say that in this situation when Wopey leads out for half-pot, it is very often a value bet. What we have to determine though is how do we define value? From experience, it could be anything from quad 4s to pocket deuces. So what we do with pocket 8s in this situation is yet to be decided, I would say. This is not really similar to the situation where, for example, we open on the button and a player, and I think it's safe to say that I would define Wopey as probably being a weaker player. This is not a line that we commonly see from talented regulars. But this is not similar to the situation where we say open the button and are led into by a small or big blind flat caller on a similar texture. And I say this because on King 4-4 rainbow, where we open in late position and are called from the blinds, a lead on that board from a weaker player is oftentimes going to be some sort of they recognize that we aren't going to have a hand very often here, and their lead is a feeble attempt for them to take the pot from us. However, in this situation where he's leading into 2 players and it's not a steal situation, I think most of the time it's going to be some form of a value bet here. When he does lead for half pot with pocket 8s, I don't mind giving players like this action, and I'm a little suspicious anyways, so I don't mind the call. Really what I'm hoping for when we call here is to get a decent-ish turn card, and I would define the 9 of clubs kind of a decent-ish turn for us. I'd prefer a deuce, but what can you do? Or I'd prefer an 8, I guess. But really what I'm hoping for in this situation is just to get my hand to showdown. Ideally, it would go check, 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 check on the turn and river, but I will be willing to pay him off if we get an $8 or maybe a $10 turn bet. And there are two reasons for this. One is, of course, an $8 bet will be perceived by me to be weaker. Also, it gives us a better risk reward, i.e. better pot odds on our turn call. And from my experience, when somebody bets $8 on the flop and $8 on the turn, they often end up betting $8 on the river, and it's quite easy for us to just call down and get to showdown and see their pocket deuces. However, when the $16 bet rolls off, I think, one, I'm going to perceive it more likely to be strength because they're risking more of their money, and it's also going to destroy our pot odds and make it more difficult for us to call them down. So I do like I don't mind the play on the flop, and I like the turn fold.